Across the globe, from icy Scandinavia to the jungles of South America, from the deserts of the Middle East to the islands of the Pacific, there is one story that keeps surfacing. A flood. Not just any flood, but a massive, world-consuming deluge, one that drowns civilizations, reshapes the land, and spares only a chosen few. The survivors live on to rebuild and to tell the story, which strangely echoes across cultures that never met. How could this be? In Mesopotamia, one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, clay tablets tell of Utnapishtim, a man warned by the gods to build a great boat and gather animals before a divine flood destroyed humanity. This tale, recorded in the Epic of Gilgamesh over 4,000 years ago, sounds incredibly familiar to anyone who knows the biblical story of Noah's Ark. Yet it predates it by centuries. But it doesn't stop there. Travel east to India, where ancient Hindu texts speak of Manu, a virtuous king who was warned by a talking fish, an avatar of the god Vishnu, that a flood is coming to cleanse the earth. He builds a boat, ties it to the fish, and survives the waters that drown all of creation. In ancient Greece, Deucalion and Pyrrha escape a divine flood by sheltering in a wooden chest, then repopulate the world by casting stones that transform into people. In Chinese myth, the great floods are so devastating that the hero Gun is sentenced to death for failing to control them. His son Yu ultimately succeeds and becomes a culture hero. The Maya, Inca, and Native American tribes tell of floods that ended previous worlds, while Australian Aboriginal stories describe water covering the land and reshaping everything. Different names, different gods, but the core is the same. A flood sent from above, destruction of nearly all life, a single family or hero surviving, and then rebirth. Could these widespread stories all be coincidences? Or were ancient people remembering something real? Let's turn to science. During the last ice age, the Earth was locked in glaciers. Massive sheets of ice covered large parts of the continents. But around 12,000 years ago, that began to change. As the planet warmed, those glaciers melted and sea levels rose, not gradually, but rapidly. In some places, over 300 feet of rise within a few centuries. That may not sound dramatic until you realize entire coastlines would have vanished, islands disappeared, lowlands became seabeds. For coastal civilizations, many of which left no written record, it would have felt like the world itself was drowning. One theory that gained traction in the early 2000s is the Black Sea deluge hypothesis. Researchers suggest that the Mediterranean Sea once broke through a natural dam and flooded into the Black Sea basin with such force that water rushed in at 200 times the volume of Niagara Falls, turning a freshwater lake into a salty inland sea and submerging thousands of square kilometers of land. If that happened, it would have been unforgettable. And then there are the underwater mysteries. Off the coast of India, the submerged ruins of Dwarka spark debate. Could it be the legendary city from Hindu epics, lost to the sea? In Japan, the strange formations of Yonaguni look like terrace structures, though scientists disagree on whether they're man-made or natural. Even in the Bahamas, undersea stone formations led some to speculate about the lost city of Atlantis, though most mainstream scholars remain skeptical. Still, the pattern is striking. For every ancient flood myth, there seems to be a local disaster, a dramatic rise in sea level, or even ruins hidden beneath the waves. This brings us to a fascinating theory: myth as memory. Before writing, before books, before even alphabets, early humans preserved knowledge the only way they could, through oral stories, passed from mouth to mouth, generation to generation. But stories are fragile. They change, evolve, adapt, and over thousands of years, raw history can transform into legend and then into myth. But that doesn't mean it's false. It means it's a memory, filtered through fear, faith, and imagination. Think about it. If your entire village was wiped out by a flood, and you survived, how would you explain it? Especially if it happened again and again over generations. You might say the gods were angry, that it was punishment, that only the good were spared. You might even carve the story in stone or sing it to your children so they would never forget. In this way, flood myths may not be wild inventions, but ancestral memories of real, traumatic events. And that's what makes this so powerful. The flood myths may not describe a single global flood like in the movies, but instead a pattern of catastrophic flooding that struck different places at different times, leaving such a deep mark on human memory that it became universal. So, what does this mean for us today? In a world facing rising seas, melting glaciers, and climate shifts, perhaps the stories of the Great Flood aren't just warnings from the past. Maybe they're reminders that water has shaped us before and could again. Perhaps we should listen more closely to the myths we once dismissed, because sometimes legends hold more truth than we're ready to admit.